and the future of Ukraine in the European Union, in the Euro, in NATO. And I call for Ukraine, for the EU to work together to make it possible that Ukraine will be the 34th member of the European Union at the end of this decade, to vote in the European Parliament elections 2029. That's now 9 hard years to get ready, but it's much better to do it. And I remind everybody, we were able to integrate Western Germany in the European structures in the 1940s and 50s, after the Second World War. It was created under so much more difficult conditions. The European Union, the coal and steel community in the beginning. After the World War II, you cannot believe what kind of terrible emotions there were in Europe and what kind of level of destruction there was. And you mostly know that was really very terrible. It was possible to integrate Western Germany. It was not easy for the French, for the Dutch, for the Belgians, after everything that happened until 1945. So it can be done. And Ukraine has done nothing wrong. Ukraine is our partner, our friend, and it should be member of NATO, of the EU, and of the Euro. And I will now explain in great detail how this could be done to achieve greater unity. I also say why 34th, because there will be Bosnia, Kosovo, Serbia, and also Georgia. Obviously, we should include the whole of the Balkans in the European Union and also the pro-European ERB countries, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine. So what's the way forward? Adopt the euro. That's very important, like Germany did with the German mark. In 1948, with the currency reform, Montenegro and Kosovo did that as well and recognized Kosovo, obviously, to be unity between the allies in Southeastern Europe. And you will not lose Crimea and Donbass by this. Never forget that, Germany is now united and rich, How it happened? First, Germany joined the EU, NATO, and had the currency reform, the mark, and then came the unity of Eastern Germany, where there is individual regions like Saxony. They have joined Western Germany because it was so rich and so successful, so secure and so free. And this is what Ukraine has to achieve, and this is very important. And we can afford the costs. We should confront Russia on this one. And anyhow, it will not lead to any kind of escalation because the Ukrainians want to join anyhow. And who are we to reject them? That's really very wrong. And this is Mr. Adenauer. He's my personal hero. He's the hero of European success and prosperity because he was the man insisting on NATO accession of Western Germany in 1955. He managed that, And, it was the Western German economic resources which allowed the prosperity of Western Europe and the whole success of the Cold War. This was the courageous decisions of 48, 49 with NATO, 55 with German NATO membership and the currency reform in 48. This really, of course, it takes time, A war might be quick. In some years you win, if you win. But the cost of destruction and only one side winning, we cannot reconquer Crimea or Donbass, and Ukraine certainly cannot do it as well, and it won't. The only way to solve these issues is long-term, economically and institutionally by our working institutions, Ukraine to reform exactly like Western Germany did it after World War II, and this will be the success. So I will now go a bit into the history to understand the context. Look, we were very lucky, that the Soviet Union collapsed, and Ukraine got free in these important years of 91. It could have gone totally on the different way. The KGB tried to take power already on the 19th of August. Then came Yeltsin, then came the breakup of the Soviet Union, Ukraine independence, and all these important, wonderful things. But we were very lucky, And the powerful KGB bloc was ready to take back the power, and they have disposed already of Gorbachev. And we have been incredibly lucky. Then came the 90s. Of course, the task of transformation of Russia was too big to be achieved in 1 decade only. And then came the same group, basically, which didn't succeed in 91, but they succeeded then in 2000. And how it all happened, obviously, it happened very much connected with the fact that in Europe we had also to integrate Eastern Germany, the whole 100 million people living in between who joined the European Union already, 70 million people then in the east of Europe, and also we had the Balkan Wars, and ultimately EU and NATO had to intervene twice to help to bring peace. And obviously, that was taken then as the kind of show that the West is too strong and they have to finally do something. And then in the important year of 99, and the forces of the KGB and of the nomenclatura, not only the KGB, but the counter reaction has happened. How did they do it? Obviously now very well documented. They have, because Chechnya was already more or less independent in everything but the name, and they reconquered Chechnya and had this war basically orchestrated and did a lot of human rights and massive violence, many thousands of people killed. And that was, of course, then this great patriotic activity for Putin to win power. You can read the book Death of a Dissident. It's all very well documented. And, the 4th of September was the start of this apartment campaign, apartment bombings. And that was the bloody rise of Putin to power. And so it happened. So he came then to power in 2000 and then, of course, consolidated all these things with the energy sector. It's very well documented. And then came at the same time, parallel, again, the EU enlargement of 2004, which was, of course, a big transformation. Really, Poland was member. Really, the Baltics were member. Really, everything happened. And the Ukrainians saw that as well. Then came the rigged elections and then the protest movement, the Orange Revolution. And then, for the Russians in a way, Ukraine got lost and was lost. And of course came all these answers and the bloody counter coup orchestrated by people like Yanukovych and Manafort in 2010. And all these activities, yeah. Then obviously, the EU gradually reaccumulated with the Eastern Partnership and then also with the DCFTAs. And then came the crisis of signing of the Vilnius Summit. And then this escalation by Yanukovych and by Putin. And then the counter-reaction of European Ukraine and the heroes of Maidan. And then basically came the answer again by Putin to punish Ukraine for turning westwards again, and by him, in a way, understanding now he has lost it forever, and so he took Crimea as a punishment, and he started the Donbass War. And then, obviously, in the framework of the Donbass War, a lot of Ukrainian heroes dying, and it was really very terrible confrontation, especially in the summer of 2014 and until the second Minsk in February 2015. Yeah, but never forget how terrible this war was, because there were a lot of innocent victims as well. Europeans just crossing the airspace. Actually, the European Union not courageous enough to declare this a war, and so they didn't close the airspace. And then what happened? This civilian airliner was shot down, most likely by an accident, because they didn't really know how to handle that. And they thought it is a Ukrainian airline, but it was a Russian high-tech military equipment handled most likely by Russian operators in Ukrainian territory. And, it's very much a Russian responsibility that we lost 300 European and Malaysian civilians on this tragic day. And, of course, in Russia, people were also aware of what's happening, is because we are all no fools anymore. We know exactly what's the reality. And obviously then they killed Boris Nemtsov because he wanted to organize opposition to the Ukraine war. And they simply executed him. So, nevertheless, despite all this complicated and tragic history, the Ukrainians have joined the West, and with the DCFTA, and that we can really celebrate. It was then finally, after a lot of Russian-backed resistance in the European member states, especially in the Netherlands, it was then finally basically accepted, and it has been really transformative. The reorientation of Ukrainian trade towards the European Union is a historic success, and that's really something we can be very proud about. Yes, and then we have basically the start of the decade. We had now of the EU membership decade. But that's what we need, because leaving everything in a kind of a vacuum, neutrality, nonsense, and all these terrible things which we have had in the past, like these illusions of neutrality. Budapest Memorandum was basically a neutral Ukraine, and then what happened? The Russians have attacked it and taken to parts of Ukraine by force. Yeah? So we really have to have a Western integration decade, and we have actually not a lot of alternatives to it anyhow, because doing it like on long distance and reform a little bit in the nirvana and this kind of buffer philosophy between, and that's really all totally wrong. The Ukrainian choice is important. They want to join NATO and the EU. They have made it in the constitution. That's the overwhelming majority of the population. So please now let's open the EU, and let's include very clearly free Ukraine in NATO and in EU. And how to do it? I have made a lot of detailed proposals. What we really need now is to build an alliance with the southeastern European countries and integrate Ukraine and reform Ukraine exactly like a EU accession country until we have the final consensus for membership and for accession officially. But to back the hryvnia to the euro and to adopt the euro best, and then to join CEFTA and the Regional Cooperation Council, the EU Customs Union, and get going with real reforms, exactly like Bulgaria, exactly like Romania. And here a real land market. I was so active on that debate. Now we have at least, the moratorium is done. That was great achievement. But a real open land market like we have it in Bulgaria, in Romania, in Poland. There can be some restriction on agricultural land, that's all fine if that's really necessary. But, to open it to the EU capital market, that's what the EU basically is about, internal market. Also for capital, that means also for investment. And we have so many Ukrainians who have bought ski resorts and apartments and villas in Vienna, and then you will reject us to buy something in Ukraine. I mean, it's ridiculous, yeah. We need now a very strong post-corona recovery agenda from Ukraine, and that's exactly EU accession. And that's exactly the euro. That's exactly lowering the taxes to 10% like in Bulgaria, opening the land market, yeah, investing in infrastructure, an open pan-European labor market, and joining all the Southeastern European institutions. Yeah. So again, a free Ukraine, post-2014, reform like the BRD. It's very important, the early Western Germany. After the 70s, and that's what most people know, there was a different policy. There was a German-German treaty. There was never full recognition. The Western German always said constitutionally that unity is their long-term objective. Yeah? They have had a working relationship, but even at the last visit of Honecker in the 80s, in Germany, they never gave them the full honor, of being an independent state. But they learn to live with that, because Reconquista, it's an illusion. You have to learn to live, with Crimea, never accept it, but focus on Western future of the 40 million Ukrainians in free Ukraine. So, and then we have to see, of course, see people say, Günther is for a second Cold War. It's not my decision to invade Ukraine and to go to Syria and all. It's Russia who has started to act like the Soviet Union. It's Putin saying that the Soviet Union fall was a big disaster. It's not me. It's simply a fact. Wars you cannot choose as when you are attacked. Yeah, it's the declaration of the Second Cold War happened by Putin. Certainly in 2014, if not in 2008, and if not earlier. So definitely that's something, And how did the BRD become so successful? Because that's important to understand, It was the German currency reform. And why it happened? Because the Soviet Union manipulated this occupation mark, which was from 45 to 48. They simply printed a lot of money. and the Western German allies, the ones who are in the occupation responsibility, mainly the Americans, thought that cannot be. How can be the Soviet Union just prints money like paper, like in the copying machine, and we have to pay for everything? And that was, of course, totally unfair. So then they went for a real German mark, backed by the American dollars and by American fiscal power. And then there was a firm fundament for economic miracle. And so it happened. Of course, also then happened the Marshall Plan, happened also the economic liberalization of Western Germany with Erhard and under Adenauer's guidance, and all these other important reforms. But nevertheless, the firm fundament, and that's, I think, the most important decision in any economy, is the currency. And the currency was the German mark, and it worked very well. And now, then already, and this is very striking, already 61, within 13 years after the introduction of the German mark, they had to build a wall in Eastern Germany because the prosperity differential was so big, the living conditions were so bad in Eastern Germany that 3.5 million Eastern Germany simply ran away as refugees into Western Germany in order not to live in such terrible condition, and they were right so. So did the BRD ever give up unification, recognize the GDR? No, no, it was the Hallstein Doctrine, never to recognize. Then, of course, came the left in power, and they started to recognize and make this kind of big show for peace. And, that was the terrible 70s. The Soviet Union was fooled by all the energy which they could sell to the European customer via the Austrian Energy Gate. And there was a crisis from Nixon to Vietnam. And so there was this and in Europe, all the left-wing powers from Kreisky to Brandt to Olof Palme, they were all making this, we have to make peace with the Soviet Union. Okay, good. Luckily it really didn't happen, and luckily it never was, even under that circumstances, any kind of allowing Eastern Germany to be fully recognized by the BRD. And the history, how it actually worked out, really very good. So, yes, the National Unity Day was always the 17th June. That was the day when the Eastern German workers protested for these terrible conditions in Eastern Germany already in 1953. And the Russian and Eastern German military, they with force killed so many people. It is really very, very terrible. And so that should be always a national day to be remembered. So what has BRD history to do with Ukraine 2020? We have to build a more federal Ukraine. We have to really build the Federal Republic of Western Germany, and really make sure that in the constitution the option to joining again for Crimea and Donbass is there. So Russia occupies Sevastopol and Crimea and two half regions, that's Eastern Donbass and Eastern Lugansk, and make sure they can join one day back to free federal Ukraine, and then to really solve the issue over time by that. Is a compromise with Russia possible? I understand President Zelensky really tries that, and peace is always worth trying, and we hope for peace. But what kind of peace? A kind of submission of Ukraine to Russia? A kind of neutralization again? Will Russia really give up Crimea and leave Donbass for that one? It's all possible. If there's goodwill in Russia, everything is possible, and I'm the first one to be happy for that. But, now we have already 6 years of this situation, and that Russia will give up Crimea? I don't think so. And that they will even give up Donbass? I also don't think so, because they want to keep it like an open wound to block the Western integration of Ukraine, and the Western integration is what will make Ukraine successful. So a South Tyrolean status for Eastern Donbass, I also don't think so, because this is really the wrong role model for Eastern Donbass. To have some kind of regional autonomy in some aspects could be done, but not to have strong federal powers for these regions on the western trajectory of Ukraine. They obviously can have some kind of a own oblast, own region. I think that should be divided, in two parts of eastern Donbass and two regions of Lugansk. And there can be a specific issue on that they have a specific region, an oblast, yes, and then they will have own authorities, But we always have to see who will be allowed to vote there, because after 6 years of lawless terror regime of some militias, with a lot of force and terror, you cannot make elections at the gunpoint. It's not possible. It must be international supervised elections on the voting roll of 2014 February. And, with these guarantees that all the people who lived there in 2014 can really vote wherever they live now in Europe, Canada, or in Ukraine. And or in Russia. And they can vote for free. Then we can make elections, but not before. So does Russia negotiating goodwill? Any sign of that? They poisoned their opposition leaders. They have made actually no kind of visible sign of goodwill. The prisoner exchange, yes, that was of course important. There were some, but I cannot really see much more than that. But okay, I'm always for peace and optimistic. But let's us not forget, at the German border, there was basically not a lot of victims anymore. So freezing the conflict, and that's what already happening, is the right answer. And in a way, yes, building a wall, but not on our side. It will be the Russian authorities in Donbass and Crimea building a wall, because Ukraine will be so successful with adopting the euro and with joining the West that the people really don't want to live there anymore, and they will leave into Ukraine. And that should be very welcome. Yes, I focus very much on reforming Ukraine, because I think that should be the higher priority. Like being like a small animal in front of the snake. We call it in German language. That means you are paralyzed, you get eaten. You really have to disengage from all these talks with Russia and focus really most efforts on reforming Ukraine like a European country. So, free Ukraine, you want to join the EU? Great, welcome. But also treat the EU citizens in Ukraine better, really open your labor market, do exactly like in the Schengen visa case, unilateral opening of the labor market, of the land market, treating EU citizens already much better, and demilitarizing the borders with the EU. It's a shame how that border looks, militarized border, Poland, Ukraine, Poland, Romania, Poland, Hungary, Poland, Slovakia. That's all totally wrong. Remove all these installations. It's only corrupt and it helps nothing. We are not the problem. We are your allies. Remove all this military from the borders. Make it a normal European border with minimal kind of checks. No military, no people with submachine guns. This is all totally wrong, and start to treat the Europeans living in Ukraine much better. I lived many years there. It's not so good. It's all very complicated. You are treated no better than the Chinese or anybody in the world. And, that's not, if you want to join the European Union, that's simply not the way. So my question and my call, can Zelensky be the Adenauer of Ukraine? Let's see. It's still only the beginning. Let's hope there will be more courageous steps. Recently, the economic reform was stalled. The change of prime ministers and all these things, I cannot really see much progress, to be certainly very honest. And okay, but I'm optimist. Let's hope there is chance for Zelensky to be the Adenauer of Ukraine. What I want to say with that, make sure that the Western integration is the priority, starts with the Euro, starts with NATO, and starts with really focusing on free Ukraine economic reform. And it was not easy for Adenauer under the pressure of this end of the 40s and the beginning of the 50s. He was accused for being a treasonous prime minister. He was accused of selling out the East. He was accused of losing the East, and so on and so on and so on. But with his very firm Western conviction, and in Germany there were a lot of people who are anti-American from the war. America just won against Germany 4 years before. There were a lot of people who were fighting against American soldiers. There was a lot of left and right-wing opposition against pro-American policy. But Adenauer, he was strong, he was smart, he was really leading Western Europe and to success with these important decisions, and this we have to repeat in Ukraine. So when it comes against the odds, of course, there is resistance. Of course, there is opposition. Of course, some people are against it. But it can be done, and it was done today, this year in Montenegro, again, also with a population quite negative towards America and towards the West, with a lot of Russian propaganda. You can win these debates. In Croatia, we won these debates. Yeah, and we can also win that in the capitals of the European Union. Ukraine must be the wonderful product. Yeah, it all starts back home to make the right decisions. Yeah, West integration starts with the euro. I mean, the most tragic mistake after the war for 2014 and the currency crisis, two major currency crises in 2014 and 15, was not to immediately peg the currency towards the euro after it has reached whatever this low level of 30. And then, when this is the competitive level, to fix it there, to peg the currency and to have a firm fundament, and then to keep it there forever. And then to transform into the euro, because that's what you need to do. First the euro, then NATO, then EU, and then unity. That's the formula for success, and it starts with the euro. And of course, NATO can be also argued. BRD was exactly like divided, like you are now, and half occupied or 1/3 occupied, and it joined NATO, and the Article 5 also only for free Ukraine, obviously, and the same can be done. And maybe it will take 20 years. In Germany, it took from the year 49 to NATO membership, it took until 40 years of occupation. I don't wish it that it's 40 years, but better to have 40 years and success and a result. And I think given that the Soviet Union was much more powerful economic competitor and geostrategic enemy than Russia today, I think it will not be 40 years. Let's think in about direction of 20 years, if now the decisions are made, which I'm calling for. Sure, unity is not automatically, it is also not a guarantee, but it's a high possibility, and I'm absolutely optimistic that this will happen as well. In the case of Ukraine, Crimea will be back, and also Donbass. So federalism, but one of the things you have to do, to make a real federal reform, to transform Ukraine. Federalism is a great word. It means power to the people, power to the regions, empower the regions. Build a second chamber of the parliament. Make sure you have a German or American model. I mean, what's bad on an American model? What's bad on a German model or an Austrian model of organizing the state? And then, because that brings the basis then for Thuringia and for Saxonia, they were regions. They were lost, and then it was not the GDR which joined the BRD. It was the individual regions of the GDR which have made an application to join the Federal Union of Western Germany. And now it's the federal state of of Germany, and that's very good. So anyhow, if there's goodwill from Russia, let's do a UN mission, like we had it in Kosovo, in Bosnia, in Croatia, many other places. So if there's goodwill from Russia, they want a peace. If they are UN superpower with veto, let's go for a Crimea mission, let's go for Eastern Donbass. And if they are not consenting, then we already see that there is no sense in talking too much and losing time. Focus really on reforms of federal Ukraine, BRD style, to prepare for unity later into 2040s, and make sure there is a real focus on reconstruction and on these reforms. Another important aspect is, of course, Ukraine is a huge defense industry producer, and that's very important. And we have to start, as we did also with defense integration in the European Union, because we started coal and steel integration for a reason, because these were the war materials. And then later we also started with the defense industry integration. It's called Airbus now, basically. That's the state industries of Germany and France united. It makes now airplanes, but it makes also fighter jets and makes a lot of other things. So what is very, very important is to make the same with Ukraine and all your Ukroprom, Antonov and Yuzhny and whatever there is. There's so many important strategic assets in Ukraine, to integrate them in a debt for equity swap with the Airbus industry and really make sure that Ukraine state is then reducing its debt level or will be shareholder in Airbus, something like this, like Germany's shareholder in Airbus, can be both done in a mix, and then to really have this defense industries organized in a pan-European context, and also make sure that we are really so tightly interconnected within the Ukrainian situation that Ukraine is secure. It's one way to secure Ukraine, by defense industry integration. So that's a summary of all the points I have already made for the future when it comes to compare to Croatia and also follow that role model. Joining CEFTA back to the euro, that's already recognized Kosovo. I made all these points already. Yes, it's Bulgaria, President Zelensky. It's not Georgia. There was a lot of debate, and obviously, unfortunately, a lot of people think still in post-Soviet terms, like we know Georgia very well. Saakashvili is flying around and all these things, yeah. Georgia is amazing in its success, but Georgia also today needs to do the same, like I say here. It's now about EU accession and NATO accession. It's no longer to be a miracle land in some aspects. That's very good. You can reform anti-corruption like Georgia, public administration like Georgia, but also Georgia has to adopt the euro. Georgia has to do 10% taxation because the current 20% is not low enough. Georgia is excellent in doing business, in opening land market and in energy. That's all fine. But the big parameter now have changed to 2004. It's now 16 years later. Now it's real accession policy. Adopting the euro, the regulatory framework of the EU, all the NATO standards, treating yourself like a EU candidate country, doing it like Bulgaria, not with the corruption of Borisov, but being in the terms and in the framework. Bulgaria has done it really perfect, yeah. And was also in CEFTA, by the way. So coming back to liberate Crimea, the way to do that is definitely to offer the Crimean big, generous development packages, and we can afford. And we will make this offer, and we continuously make it until the Crimea people have understood, and one day there will be a chance for them to vote. Yeah? The same is also for the Donbass. We open already an agency, but based in free Donbass, obviously, and in free Kherson, and in 2 agencies for regional development. And let's say the moment they join Ukraine again, this is the offer. Here comes the other thing. We need also an EU agency for management of European Kherson, and make that the South Korea, the role model of Western European standards, because that's basically the northern twin of Crimea. And develop the Kherson region so well that the people from Crimea go there to work in the tourism industry, in the manufacturing industry, and make that the South Korea. South Korea, I want to say, this kind of lighthouse role model for comparison. And the same is true with the free Luhansk region, with Western Luhansk and with Western Donbass, and we need massively to invest in this region. So I call on Ursula von der Leyen, lead Europe, not administer. I hope that's understandable in English, it's a German word, but not just daily administration, calling for a higher climate target and all these things, that's administrative task. Yeah. The real leadership is unity, and we need for potential candidate status of Ukraine and Georgia. That's the strategic priority of that commission, and that must be the most important thing Europe does right now, to give this potential EU candidate status. And there is no morality in not doing that. Yeah, we have promised that in Thessaloniki. We have promised that in Copenhagen. They are European countries. We have to do that. So that's Thessaloniki I mentioned already. So basically that's very important to make a similar summit. And also I have made, that might be too much for some, that we can also buy off the anti-Ukrainians in Italy and in France and in Greece and in Austria. We can buy them off. We can reduce the sanctions, yeah, or maybe even lift the sanctions to Russia if they agree on the potential candidate country status. Some people will criticize me, and they have done that. I'm weak on Russia. I'm certainly not, yeah. But the idea is not to punish Putin for his things. We have anyhow very little means to do that, yeah. But if they want to lift the sanctions, yeah, then allow us to give Ukraine the EU perspective. And that's the deal, yeah? And, we can live in peace with Russia in some aspects, yeah? And we will not be maybe very popular with that. But from time to time, it's compromise is necessary. If the Russians want to lift the sanctions, and I think they want, yeah? Okay, then allow the Hungarians to consent, allow the Greeks to consent, and the Cypriots to consent. So basically, that's the deal I propose. It's not so easy, but my task is really, and my call is, help the Ukrainians who are in freedom, help the free Moldovans, help the free Georgians. The unity will come later as a result of the prosperity differential. We win this confrontation, this second Cold War, we have to win economically, and we will. So Spain or Ukraine, who deserves more solidarity, we just put many hundreds of billions around, yeah? And now I ask myself, do we really have no money for Ukraine? We gave 50 millions with loans and guarantees to Ukraine, and we just have, all in all, only the SURE program is somehow 23 billion for Spain, and we are really capable to do that, and that's also very good. I'm also in favor. Yeah? Anyhow, what I say, we need an Eastern European Adenauer plan, not a Marshall Plan. I'm very pro-American, but don't use the American terms all the time. We need an Adenauer plan. It's less about massive redistribution. It's more about strategic EU integration. That means Euro, NATO, and obviously strategic infrastructure. But the most important things for Ukraine is the Euro and the NATO perspective and the membership. Yeah? And then there's all these instruments attached which also result in a lot of money. But we are also not calling for American money anymore because we are a rich continent. Yeah? We also have 14 trillion GDP now as EU 27. We can afford Ukraine. We don't need American taxpayers' money. They have other tasks as well in the world. Of course, they can help, yeah? But in generally, it's really like this, that we should be able to help the European periphery from Ukraine and Balkans as a rich, unified European Union ourselves. So I come back to the issues of currency. We have a lot of currency packs. I'm not talking out of the air already. We have Bulgaria, we have Bosnia, we have Macedonia already. We had also Lithuania and Estonia having the same policy before they joined the Eurozone. We have also currency packs with 14 countries in Africa. The euro is already on the way to be a global currency. It's totally normal to have currency packs. And it's much better than the declining crises of Eastern European currencies in the last 12 years. It was one shock after another. And in 2008, 2014, 2015, and now in Corona, the longer that takes, it will be again a meltdown. The Turkish lira is already on the way down, and so on. So let's come back to celebrate the euro as it is. We have already now the big decisions of this year was to join Croatia and Bulgaria will join the Eurozone very soon, and they are already in EMR2, and that's very good. I have also made the point that Lithuania, a country which is more closer to Ukraine and to Georgia, it was in the Soviet Union, and now it is already a member of the Eurozone, but it had started always with a dollar peg, and then it swapped 2002 to a euro peg. I mean, please study the role models. That's really happening. And the Ukrainian currency is a complete mess, a disaster. We had started with 1 to 0.76 to 1, and then it was 8. That was, of course, illusionary peg to the dollar, or not based on economics. And then we have now the 30. And, free currency crisis in the meantime. And now at this level, it's really good to peg. And the Montenegrinians have done first the peg and then adopted the German mark and then basically went to the euro straight. And it's so much more successful than all others with the flexible currency. It's much more, it makes them investment safe, it makes the Western trajectory symbolically very clear, it makes it sure that Serbia and Montenegro has overtaken Serbia now first time. It is a much poorer country from all economic parameters, but it's now richer than Serbia. It's quite substantial. And it's also, it stabilizes the economy, the financial system. It was such a right decision. Then for infrastructure, We have also the European Transport Union and especially the Balkan Transport Union where Ukraine should join. That's really very important to have a big infrastructure package towards Eastern Europe and also to have, by the way, highway tolling. Yeah? Ukraine has such a big highway system already and doesn't charge for it. That's totally wrong. So when it comes to, no, that's more general, that's a highway payment system for later. Then we come to the big corridors which we need, to really make sure that there is a major kind of investment package. I call it the Chernobyl Ukrainian Highway Project because the Ukrainians again called it the Eisenhower Interstate Project. But Chernobyl is the leader of a free Ukraine in the beginning. In the 90s, the leader of Kruk, he was really the symbol and he died in a car accident. So it's a symbol for road safety and also to honor this freedom fight in the 90s and also to use a Ukrainian role model to build all the infrastructure necessary. Then I call to change the European Danube region into the European Danube, Dniester and Dnieper region and really build a big water ring in Eastern Europe to complement the Rhine-Main-Donau channel and to connect the Baltic with the Black Sea. That's really important and bypass Russia. So now for trade, I have already made a lot of videos about CEFTA and Ukraine. In 1997, that was already discussed, yeah. But then the appeasement guys won, and Ukraine was arrogant and didn't need it, and Kosovo war and all these things, and Putin. But it's really time to catch up, and for Ukraine to join the Central European Free Trade Agreement, really very much time. So CEFTA is very beneficial as a Central European Free Trade Agreement. And that's very positive for Ukraine to join. And it should be also Georgia and maybe Armenia, Azerbaijan first. And Armenia still is with the Russians, so is Belarus. But to keep this option open and to create a permanent long-term trading area east of the EU. And only once they are in the EU, then the countries mature to EU membership. But that's a very good framework. And it's also complemented because CEFTA is already from 92. But after the Balkan Wars, the EU and the US have established a regional cooperation council, first the Stability Pact, and then it was transformed in 2008 in the Regional Cooperation Council. But there are so many different units from Center for Excellence in Finance, Transport Community, Regional School for Public Administration, Youth Exchange, Anti-Corruption Initiative. That's all perfect, yeah, helping very much the transformation from war to prosperity. In the last 20 years, the achievements in the Balkans are amazing. Of course, never ever is ever happy. I'm also not happy with Austrian politics, but okay, that's another issue. But the thing is, it is really grandiose and well working. And why to replicate it in the ERP when it's already in the periphery of Europe working very well? Moldova is already a member of almost all. Ukraine of the energy community. It's now time for all ERP who want to be invited and to be supported to join. Because I say we have one European climate. We don't have a different climate in Ukraine and in Balkans. No, we have, because it's much worse, yeah? Even because we don't have the EU mechanisms of support and institutional regulatory alignment, yeah? The Balkans is much closer already to that. But all ERP should be invited to all EU agencies, to all 30 EU regulatory agencies. They should be invited as observers, if they want, and to be supported to join. We need a pan-European climate union. We need also a pan-European digital union. That's obviously clear. European public services, digitalization, that should be a focus on digital municipalities, focus on digital payment, and so on and so on. And all of this should be open for all ERP countries and for Ukraine. We need a pan-European labor market. How often have I said it was totally silly in the European migration crisis of 2015 that our asylum systems, which are for political refugees like the Syrians or like the people from Afghanistan, which we left alone, and then they were blocked with Ukrainians and with Albanians and Kosovo and Serbians and Macedonians. Oh, it was crazy. We need to allow them to the labor market. Now in Corona, again, we have seen how terrible that is when they all work in informality because we are so protectionist and so brutal and racist to exclude them. And then they have to go back in the crisis of Corona, and we even didn't allow them over the border. I mean, this is exploitation, and this is very bad. Give them the right to work, yeah? Give them the right to stay, and allow our fellow Europeans to access our labor market, please. Yeah? We are not a socialist republic. Really, it's enough. It's so mean. And all this grandstanding on human rights, and then the Ukrainians are treated like this, and the Kosovos are treated like that. Yeah? It's a shame. Anyhow, then comes Adriatic Charter. You know, the Ukrainians never really understood me when I invited them for Adriatic Charter, because they always were thinking I'm a yacht captain or something like that. But that's the US government defense department who has called it like this to support the ex-Yugoslavian Republic with NATO accession. And it has achieved Croatia, Montenegro, Albania, North Macedonia already in NATO. It's an amazing success, yeah. So I call this process is open. Ukraine, Georgia join, Moldova join, and really support this Tirana Adriatic Charter. No, it's not based in Tirana, but this kind of US Navy-led project, basically, to really prepare the countries good and also build an alliance with the Balkans. So yes, troops from Germany. Yeah, big debate. You know, after 17 years post-war, we can also discuss about redistribution of troops, but not to send them back home like Trump has proposed, but send them to Ukraine. Yes, to Georgia. These are the countries who need security now, and send them to the countries and to the Balkans, obviously, because we have Serbia still as an issue country, and Ukraine and Russia as a hostile state, so we need protection from America. That would be more fitting to the other things, but the pan-European energy market, definitely we need that as well, and that's very important to include Ukraine. I reiterate, we need also a European Energy Union to complete it, and the 1st of June is the reminder for that, because it should be a European Day, because that was the start in the year 68, when the Austrians started to be the Soviet energy hub and gate, when the pipeline was ready. And then basically they got very rich, and they could subsidize their kind of failed system for another 30 terrible years, yeah, or 30, 25, 22 terrible years, yeah, because they had all this money from the European energy consumers, which was subsidizing the 70s expansion of the Soviet Union globally. So we have created this Dr. Busek, I want to mention him personally, the Stability Pact Coordinator. He has made a lot of working groups in the important sectors, and they have developed into this very important offspring sector-specific regional organizations like the Energy Community. Ukraine is already a member, and it was so beneficial after Ukraine joined, transformed to the West. It was already a member of that one. It started to really implement it, not just to block and but really do that. And now the energy sector is the one which is really the one big success story. So we should make a European holiday on the 21st of July, the European Crimea Freedom Day, because all these Russian-occupied regions from Transnistria, Crimea, Donbass, Abkhazia, Ossetia, Nagorno-Karabakh, basically as well, it's basically regions which will be one day integrated in their countries of origin again. The 23rd of June is Victory Day for Russian plot dividing the West. Let's not forget, Russia had this strategy after 2014, Ukraine, then came the refugee crisis, the Syrian intervention, Brexit, obviously, and they were quite successful. Yeah, we were not prepared. We were like victims, and we could just watch the events. We didn't really oppose them in Ukraine. It was the Ukrainians itself who stopped them, and it was then this big Syrian intervention. We could have gone ourselves. No, the Russians went, and then all the refugees came, and we looked like victims in these years, and it's really a shame. Then Brexit was, of course, a big masterstroke to fund the anti-EU campaign there. In the light, first to create all these pictures of chaos in Europe, and then to fund this this pro-Brexit campaign that was a masterstroke of Putin, and we are like victims. Yeah, and then of course I call for massive kind of strategic disconnecting our economy from the Russians, buying less energy from the Russians, reducing our dependency from hostile Russia, and make it very strategically. We need our own kind of very intensive effort to reduce Russian leverage on Europe, mainly by changing our energy system I made a separate presentation on that one. So, okay, for Ukraine, it's very important, and for all of us as well, to understand the crimes of the past, and to commemorate the Holodomor, the Soviet and Stalin's purposeful destruction of the Ukrainian farmer population in order to export grain. He killed millions of the Ukrainian farmers, and also in Kazakhstan and also in other areas, basically to enforce industrialization by stealing the grain of the farmers and taking into account that they will be all dying, and so many did. It's a very tragic chapter. It's still, the Russians are very much against recognizing this as a genocide, but it obviously is, yeah. And it's a political act to destroy significant parts of a own population, and that's definitely a genocide. So it must be recognized by European Parliament, by all member states, and we should be not in any kind of moral duplicity here. I want to remind as well on the Bucharest summit, when we had a little bit more courage, President Bush was proposing Ukraine, Georgia in NATO, and if they would have succeeded, and then we wouldn't have these wars now, and we wouldn't have the Second Cold War. Yeah, but when we are divided and the French and Germans are opposing it, and so it's basically our guilt that the Ukraine war happened and the Georgia war happened. The Georgia war just 3 months later. So basically, if we are weak and divided, the Russians start to fill this vacuum, and we are really to blame. And it should never happen again, such a shameful summit. For Macedonia, we needed a decade to fix it. And for the Ukraine and Georgia, it's still another decade, maybe, to really have them all in EU, NATO, and the Euro. But when then the grandstanding European politicians have their own energy interests in mind and their own appeasement policies and their own kind of, I call Putin, I talk to him, it will be fine. Now, so how fine is it really turning out? So we need real more unity. Because what's happening, let's make sure, we are redistributing many hundreds of billions, for example, this year. And, we are all have these 3 major issues, Kosovo, Ukraine, and Belarus at the moment in 2020. Just yesterday was this the thing. And, we are giving, for example, I have here the exact numbers of just the SURE program for employment, yeah. And 21 billion is now to be sent to Spain, 2.7 for Greece, or for Cyprus, which ran out of the meeting for its own specific reason to block the Belarus, and we are looking like fools to the world. Everybody laughs about us, and they are getting, in the next weeks, they're getting almost 500 million euros from the European taxpayers, or the Romanians, yeah. I mean, which other country has more profited from EU and NATO membership than Romania? And they get another 4 billion now. It's totally fine. I'm happy for them. I love you, Romania. But they have not recognized Kosovo. Or the Eastern Partnership countries. It's the same on the other side around. We give 15 billion to Ukraine, save it from the Russians. In many ways we do. And then they are not recognizing Kosovo, Moldova, and Georgia the same. When we talk Kosovo, they don't listen, yeah? Or the Macedonians, Bosnians, and Serbians. When we say Minsk sanctions, and the Serbians and they run to the Russians, yeah, and we pay all this, yeah. It's all massive transfers. Serbia has got more than 10 billions. I've saw the website now. 10 billions is just it's just one part. Then comes what the bilateral aid from Germany and from France and from Austria and so on and so on. It's more than 10 billions actually, but they do what they want. Because their population is pro-Russian. Okay, good, yeah. And our taxpayers are fully full out of concern. Nobody cares for them. Anyhow. So we have to also see that all countries join the Minsk sanctions. That was what we did after Crimea and MH17 and all the crimes of Russia in Ukraine. And we should also say thank you and include Kosovo into that list. Yeah, we should also ask all all the countries like Macedonia has still not signed this Minsk sanction, and that's really we can expect them to do that. Please, Macedonia sign. So anyhow, we still have inside the EU, there's a big competition who is the biggest friend of Russia between Budapest and Vienna. And that's, of course, very shameful. I'm from Austria and I'm focused on Austrian. So the Austrians even gave a Russian national board member, which was invented for her, a fifth board member. That's a very high, it's the biggest Austrian company. It's a very high paid position. Just to have a Russian nationality with no connection to Austria has been appointed in June in that position. And when, for example, the Ukraine president comes to Austria, then meets the president, everybody's very friendly. You know, we are very friendly people. We are really very hospitable and nice people. And it was a great visit. Thank you very much for coming. But when he asked about Nord Stream 2, then they said, no, that has nothing to do with Navalny. That has nothing to do with anything. That's a commercial business. We Austrian state don't intervene in OMV. That's a completely independent company which just the Austrian state owns 31.5% and has traditionally very strong links with the Austrian politics, especially with the Social Democrats, but also in the recent times when the power changed to the Christian Democrats, then the Christian Democrats have wonderful connections to this biggest Austrian company, which is totally independent of the Austrian state. By the way, there is also this Navalny video, which everybody really has to see. Watch it. It's about money laundering of the Russian oligarchs and political elite in Vienna and the Austrian Alps. Wonderful scene. So what I say, NATO 36, we have to invite Ukraine to the Adriatic Alliance to have pre-accession and make sure that, really we have now a start of the decade of accession. And this starts with the euro, this starts with CEFTA and with Adriatic Alliance and Charter, and to make sure that Ukraine is fully fast integrated into the Western world and into Western Europe and the European Union. And also with the slide I started, I also close, Ukraine as the 44th member of the European Union by 2027 to have the negotiations done. And then to vote already, the Ukrainians to vote in the European Parliament election in 2029. By how to achieve that, by basically bypassing the European resistance, Ukraine simply adopting the euro itself, making itself NATO ready, joining all the Eastern European networking there can be, building an alliance and joining the European Union by simply so much being ready, transforming Ukraine by itself into a European country that nobody in Europe can reject Ukraine anymore. And that's, I think, a very powerful vision. I want to close with that. I want to say, welcome Ukraine, European Ukraine, adopt the euro, join NATO and join the European Union. Let's start this integration decade now and a very big success in the coming years together. And Ukraine will also contribute to the success of Europe as a member. Then in the next phase, of course, the first 20 years will be very expensive for European taxpayer, but it's worth, it's wonderful people, and they are wonderful Europeans. Let's include them in our great unification project and Ukraine be the 34th member of the European Union. Thanks a lot.